And today we are going to be learning about the professional personalization of branding yourself in the industry. And we have Briana here from Conde Nast, and she is going to share her amazing experience with us. So I'm very excited to hear you speak. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so hi, I'm Briana Guin, in case anyone doesn't know. I'm an interior designer. I started out at iCrave as a junior designer, and I am now at Conde Nast as an experiential designer. And I got there through the power of my personal branding, which we'll be talking about right now. So I'm just gonna, like Chelsea mentioned, this is the professional personalization of branding yourself. This is a topic that I am very, very passionate about because I feel that, I'm going to touch later on this, but I feel like people may not get quite why it's important to brand yourself. But I think it's really necessary for young designers to really make sure and put themselves out there where they want to be seen and not let someone else do it for you. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. So what we're going to go over today is I have 5 topics on this on branding yourself that I think we should touch upon. The first is, what is a personal brand and what does it even mean to have one? 2 is first steps in finding your brand. 3 is what elements make up a personal brand. Examples of some that I find that are really strong and cohesive throughout. And then the importance of having a personal brand. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. Okay, so again, what is a personal brand and what does it even mean to have one? So branding is the process of creating and curating your public identity and how you present yourself to the world. If you do it correctly, you should be able to it should be visible and thorough of conveying your design strengths, your design philosophy, your personal values, your capabilities and interests, long-term goals, and unique attributes. And we're gonna touch on all those throughout the presentation. So I think the biggest thing to know about what personal branding is that it is your story. Every designer has a story to tell. And so every designer should, if you want to tell your story the way that you want it to be told, you should establish a personal brand. So you know what it is, but where are you going to start? What do you do? What's the first steps? Because it's easy to say, yeah, do it. But if you don't even know where to begin, how are you going to know where to start? So the first thing is figure out who you are and what you want to be known for. What excites you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And it doesn't have to even be the interior design related. For me, I knew one thing that I wanted to include in my personal brand. I love fashion. I love styling and fashion. I mean, of course, I'm at Conde Nast now, so it clearly worked out, but I made sure to include that in my own personal brand. That way it wasn't just this thing that I do on the side. I got to use that part of my personality and what I love to do and actually infuse it into who I am, what people see when they see my branding. So also, speaking of that, are there any characteristics or skills that you excel in? So if you're really good at graphic design, or if you're really good at visual merchandising, or really good at brand identity, you can take those aspects, even if it's not related to interior design, and use it, because more than ever, brands or companies are looking for you to be multifaceted. Because my job now, I do interiors, I do graphics, I do branding, I have marketing. And so if you have things that you're interested in, you don't have to be stick to just one thing. And also, are there any tasks that drain you? Because just as important to know what you do like, it's important to know what you don't like. I know for me, I like the fun visual parts of it all. If you ask me to do any of the business part of it, I'm gonna be like, nah, I'm good. That's someone else's forte, it's not mine. And so I think, if there's something that you don't like, don't include it, even if you're really good at something, because even if you're good at something, but you don't like to do it, don't include it in your personal branding, because then people are gonna expect it from you. And also, lastly, what do you want people to know when they see you, or what do you want them to infer about you as a brand? For me, if you go to my website, it's very colorful and bold and crazy, and it's not for everyone, but I know that people get across that I am a fun person. I'm very bubbly, I'm very excitable, and I'm very bold. I like bold designs, I like bold patterns, and I like just bold people in general. And so I feel like you get that when you see me. So what do you want people to take away from you? So next, I would say to do research into creatives whose career you admire. An important step in figuring out that is to find people who you want to emulate, and it doesn't have to even just be people in the interior design field. One of my personal design or just career heroes in general is Elaine Walteroth. She was the former editor of Teen Vogue. She's currently a judge on Project Runway, and I really just love how she incorporated activism and awareness into her whole personal brand. And so that, especially with her being fashion, people can tend to see it as this frivolous and like, silly thing. Sometimes people see design the same way, but she took that platform that people see as this like, thing that's like not aware always, and said, no, I'm going to change it and change the face of it. And so like, I saw how she incorporated that into her brand. So I said, okay, you know what? I want to do the same in my brand. And so just follow these people on social media, follow their careers, see them speak, and let them inspire you. Because, if you see how they're incorporating to theirs, you can figure out how you can do it in your own way. So when's a good time to establish a personal brand? I mean, I feel like it's right now, do it as soon as possible. If you are like, and especially as college students, you're in like the perfect place to do so, because more than likely you're still figuring yourself out. You're still figuring out who you are. And, you want to make sure that if you do it hand in hand with your personal branding, they can sometimes help to inform each other almost. Like I know, like if you would have seen some of my first branding, it was not me at all. But in doing that and in figuring out along the way, like what I like, what I didn't like in terms of branding, and as a person, they help to inform each other. And also it's totally fine if your brand evolves and grows and changes with you, because hopefully it should. I recommend it. If you see that like, what you have isn't who you are now, change it. I'm actually in the middle of changing mine right now to fit more with like the things that I've come to love. And so that's like, good to know too. Because if you wait for the right time, there's never going to be a right time to start. You have to just do it. But just be sure if you do change it, you change it for the better. This was a really good example of rebranding by this, company Chobani. They went from this very like angular, kind of harsh to really nice round shapes. And not for the worse, like Smuckers did. So that's also really important to know. If you're going to rebrand yourself, make sure that it's also evolving in the best way and in a way that still shows that, how your growth as a designer is. So, we talked about what it is, how to like figure it out, or like what's the first step to take. So now we're going to talk about the elements of a personal brand. And so these are ones that you should utilize to make your personal brand and create this really nice, holistic, and cohesive image. So there are two types that I kind of like, as I was like, ruminating and figure out how to like, filter these out. I end up thinking of two types of design elements to include, or just elements to include in your branding. And that's overt, which are the things that are like, like eye-catching, it's more physical, it's visible, it's like surface level. And we're going to touch on those later. But you can see it at a glance. And then covert, these are the ones that I feel are the most important, because they're almost the building blocks. So the overt has something to stand on, and it's not just this empty, vessel. So we're going to start talking about the overt elements. And one of the first ones is, of course, physical ones. So like your logo, your color palette, your fonts, graphic design, business cards, like how does that look? How does it go together? Is it cohesive? What do you want to portray in terms of, your design intention? So make sure that a good consistent design is one of the largest visible signifiers of a good cohesive brand. You don't want to have like a minimalist aesthetic on your website and then it's really crazy on this, but then your work is brutalist. You want to make sure that it's all somewhat together. So seek out design aesthetics that you're drawn to and that inspire you. Like clearly you can see from mine, I like a lot of color. So I like sought out like, inspiration that was colorful and fun, inspired me. So that way when I was like drawn to coming up with my personal brand, I knew exactly what I liked. And then explore why you like it, what you like about it. Does it work and mesh with who you are as a person? And then how can you incorporate those elements and make it your own? Because you don't want to copy it. You want to take inspiration and then filter it through the lens of who you are as a designer and then make it your own. And so the next is like portfolio, website, and resume. Now, this is something that I'm glad I'm seeing more. It's becoming more personalized. But, I sometimes still see designers who are so scared to like have fun with their portfolio and their website that it's very like, professional and boring and simple and just black and white, and not even like black and white in the really beautiful, like minimalist design style, but just it's very to the point. They don't put any personality into it. And I can't tell who you are as a person. And so I feel like, now, and we'll touch more later as why I think this is a really big deal, but just in terms of surface level, you don't want to like walk up to someone and you're this really fun, vibrant person, and then your portfolio doesn't match you. It can be jarring sometimes. I've gotten some like that. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, didn't expect that. So it also should carry over the same graphical themes too as the rest of your branding. So just don't be afraid to like show your personality, because I feel like sometimes it's overlooked because you're trying so hard to like, you know, get a good job that you just don't make it your own. And so social media presence is also like one of the really, really big ones in terms of overt branding elements. And so it's a powerful tool in curating your brand. It can be powerful for or against you. That's up to you. But if you do choose to use social media as this element of design or element of your branding, then make sure that when you post it, it has a really nice, strong, positive effect overall on your brand. And also don't forget about professional social media outlets as well, like LinkedIn. Because if you were to go to my LinkedIn page, it matches too. Because guess what? You can change your banner, guys. Like you don't have to keep that weird blue brainwave thing they have on there, because you'll be surprised. Like I actually got my job now because someone saw my website and then went to my LinkedIn. It was like, wow, I'm really impressed at how it all kind of goes together. It really feels like an experience. Or like a story, which we're going to touch on a little bit later. But it really felt like this really nice, cohesive experience that he was able to see was carried throughout it all. And so like, because of that, I got the job I have now. So don't forget about LinkedIn, guys. I know it seems boring because it kind of is sometimes, it's a little weird, but it can do wonders. And so we have covert elements, which I feel are the most important because, like I said, these serve as the building blocks for your personal brand. And so, like I mentioned before, storytelling. I like to consider myself, you know, after designer, like a storyteller. First and foremost, I like to craft experiences and tell stories. And that doesn't just stop at like what I do as a job. It can go all into your personal branding. Because like I said earlier, it should tell a unique story that is unique to you. No one else should have this story. No one else needs to have this story. It is also more than just like an about you page in a website. It should present like every inch, it should be present in every inch of your personal branding. So like it shouldn't just stop at like your like portfolio or stop at you like just who your like your logo is. It can be in your resume. It can be like we said in your website. It can be in your social media. Just make sure that you are telling a cohesive story throughout. And it should include your passions, your goals, what you love in your background. Because one thing that I'm seeing as I've gotten out into the workforce, that employers want to hire you. You know, you don't want to go to a firm that's hiring design number 546. You want to go to a firm that wants who you are as a designer and what you bring to the table specifically. So the next one is consistency. And yes, it's a little bit of visual consistency, but also make sure that your messaging is consistent as well. You know, take into account how what your visuals are and your message are aligning with each other, and take into account like what the message you're putting out is. Like for example, you know, don't say that, you know, you're a fan of bold colors and everything like that, but then you know your portfolio is like very minimal. And like, you know, also too, if you're like an advocate for sustainability, make sure that when you send your resumes out, do it digitally. Do your website like only like your portfolio only on your website. Don't have it to where, you know, you're printing out a bunch of paper and killing trees and then say, oh, like I love sustainability. Like make sure that is visually consistent, but also that your messaging lines up with what you're putting out there. So expertise is also a really important part of covert branding elements, because you can make sure that you are showcasing your stuff, not just like telling it, but showing it also. So for instance, if you really love graphic design as well, don't just put it on there, design it, graphically design your portfolio, make your resume look like it. So that way you can say, I love graphic design, but then it's just like a really, you know, simple run of the mill portfolio. They're gonna be like, why didn't you put that in there? You know, if you love fashion, I love magazines. So my portfolio was laid out like a magazine. And so, but also I didn't have to tell them, I just did it and I made it part of my brand. So it wasn't just like, you know, beating you on the head with it. It was just this nice subtle thing where if you knew me, it was one other facet of my storytelling, like how I want it to be. And so if there are like areas that you're proficient in, make sure and show it and like tell it, you know, because you'll be surprised how many things will come up that you'll knowledge that you're knowledgeable in, that you'll be surprised that people are wanting to know about you. So for example, here is the resume that I submitted. Obviously Conde Nast is a little different because I wasn't there at the time. But when I went to interview for the job, I gave them this, you know. It is still very like clean and minimal, but you see that I have color on there. It's visual, it's eye-catching. You see where I called out my honors, and it wasn't just like, I got a 4.2. Like, it wasn't like, really boring honors. It was like, okay, I applied for work in a magazine. I'll like, that was published, and that kind of showed one of my interests. Also too, I have a section for just other interests. And you may be like, okay, why do they need to know that I love movies? They don't care about that. Well, they do. Like, me putting fashion on my resume, which you may be like, okay, will that get you a job? That doesn't seem professional. But because of that, my job now, whenever we have fashion projects, I get to be on them because they know that I love it. And so, like I said, I made it known, I showed it, and I like told it too, and I made sure that it was also present in a resume. And again, I show my resume specifically because, like I mentioned before, a resume is often overlooked in how you can incorporate your personality into it. People think that it has to be boring and black and white. It can't have any color, or else they're going to throw it out. But that's not the case. And well, we're talking that a little bit actually. And so the biggest, most important thing is to be authentic. Please, please, please. You don't know how many portfolios that I get from people who are like, I get it from them, and it's jarring because I'm like, this isn't you. This isn't your portfolio. This is what you think is going to get you hired. This is what you think is going to get you to the door. But the thing is, if you just put forward what you think is going to get you hired, yeah, it may get you hired, but it's not going to be a fit. You're not going to like what you do because you didn't make it to you. Like, for instance, like my portfolio, it is not for everybody. I remember when I was in the student portfolio competition, and it was 8 companies there that you could interview with. And they said you can get either up to all 8 interviews, or you can only get 2, depending on if the company wanted to move further with you. And so I was excited that I got that far, but I only got 2 interviews. And I remember feeling so bad about myself because other people got all 8 or got 7. And I was like, I only got the 2. So I felt like really bad about myself. But then I got there and I met the people, the ones that rejected me and the ones that wanted to like interview and hire me. And I was like, you know what? I'm glad. I'm really, really glad actually, because I was 100% myself on my resume, my portfolio. It was colorful and crazy, but the people that saw it appreciated it and wanted it. And after I got hired, the boss said they fought. They were like, hey, no, I want her. I want her. And that's what you want. You want someone that wants you, not just like generic designer where it's like, oh, okay, like I've seen the portfolio a million times, and it's, and also too, it could backfire on you because another story, a friend of mine from interior design, she crafted her portfolio to make it match, to appeal to the masses, basically. Where it would get her a job, and it would just, she kind of sent out to like a lot of people. And so she got a job, and I checked it with her a year later, just kind of checking up on how life was going, and she was gone because she didn't like it. She basically kind of let herself down and didn't make it true to herself. And so she ended up in the firm that they did nice work and she liked it there, but it wasn't fulfilling her. It wasn't like making her excited to get up in the morning. It wasn't like, and that's something that a personal brand can do for you. It's about quality over quantity. And that's what I always say. So these are just some examples of personal brands I find really efficient and effective. They're like mostly interior design, or they're all interior designers, but they all took the love of interior design and used it for other medias and other passions. So the first is Rachel Snow. Me and her went to school together actually, but she has a blog now, and you can see here from her Instagram page to her website to her work, it all looks like her. So on the level of overt, it all looks the same. It feels cohesive. You're not wondering like, oh, this feels like jagged or it doesn't feel connected. And then also, if you know her, like you see, it looks very polished. It looks very clean, looks very sophisticated. That's who she is as a person. She is very polished and sophisticated, and she loves like elegance and luxury, and you see that reflected in her brand. So it's not just like, something that she thought could appeal to the masses. Everyone might even like this, but she knows what she likes, and she knows the best way to like get the results that she wants out of life. And this is another designer, Terry Gu. She also is an interior designer, but she's getting more into blogging as well. And you see she has this really nice rustic, warm tone. She's very like earthy and minimal with like a hint of like, you know, rich colors here and there. And again, as a person, you see her, she looks like this, like she embodies this. And that's the thing that I really want to get across, is that this should come easily. It's not like you are trying to like, you know, retrofit yourself into your brand. You're basically taking who you are as a person, your personality, and bringing it to life, like, you know, telling your own story. So that's why it should look like you, because it is you. It's just you on a digital platform. And then a designer after my own heart, I really love her, Shannon Maldonado. She is an interior designer who, again, like Elaine Waltz-Ross, she really is passionate about activism and raising awareness. And so you see that in her work as well. So she loves like bright colors, bold colors. So she incorporated that into her actual design. But again, going back to that covert elements, these two spaces right here are from a social club that is for people of color in New York City, because people of color in New York are often being like, we see them being pushed out and gentrified. So she's like, I want to help design a place that is for them, ran by them, you know, that way, like they have a place to go to that feels like home. It doesn't feel like, you know, you're being pushed out, and you have this place to gather and create. And so again, that is one of the things I mentioned before, where people should be able to see your values, see what you value, what you're passionate about, and what you love through your design, through your personal brand, and through everything you do. So you can make things look nice. And that was one thing I wanted to get at. You can make beautiful, amazing projects, but they can also have sustenance. They can also have substance, and they can mean something while also being a beautiful place to be in. So that was a lot. We talked about, you know, what a personal brand is, how to figure it out, how to get started, and what all it encompasses. But I think the biggest thing is like, why are you doing this? What's the point? You know, like, what do you need? I remember when I was in school and my teacher would harp and harp about like, you gotta have a personal brand, guys. You need to make sure and figure out who you are. And I was like, why? I don't want to have my own firm. I don't need I don't need a logo. I don't need a personal brand. That's stupid. It's silly. I didn't get it. But then as I got further into it, I was like, oh, okay, you know, you may think it seems unnecessary or excessive, and the benefits may not be all there. And there are a lot of reasons why, but for me, the biggest one is that it's the key to defining your own career. Because let me tell you, if you don't define it, someone else is going to do it for you. If you just kind of float along and you're like, oh, I mean, I want to be a designer, but you don't have a solidified place or like what you want to do, people will just put you in positions. And then you're going to wake up at 40 and be like, oh, wait, I didn't want to do this. This is what I wanted to do. And so if you establish your own personal brand, then you can then establish your own career and figure out what you want to do. Because now more than ever in this day and age, we're seeing more and more careers pop up that you wouldn't have seen even 5-10 years ago. You know, like even my job, experiential designer. When I first heard that title, I was like, what does that even mean? But if I got into it, I see all it is this blend of interiors and graphics and branding, and you take it and you merge it all together to tell one cohesive story and give an experience. You know, something like that wouldn't have existed a long time ago, because one, interior designers weren't taken seriously, so we're just kind of getting our foot in the door. And now we're seeing that you can craft these careers the way that you want it to be. So it's important to know where you stand in terms of your personal identity and claim your stake in that place. Like, for instance, I know that I love fashion. I love the intersection of fashion, design, interiors, and styling, and all of that. So I said, you know, I'm going to stake my claim, make it my own. And because I knew my identity and I knew basically how to establish my identity, and I did it early on, and I made sure to stick with it and always stay true to myself and didn't like stray or falter because like someone may have said, oh, that's too much color for me, I don't like that. And it's like, well, sorry you don't like it, but the people that I am now working for love it, and that's what's important. And I think that's the one thing that I really, really want to get across the most, is make sure that it is true to you, so that way that you have a say in what your career turns out to be. And so I will leave you with this, is that personal branding is your story to tell. Be authentic with it, have fun with it, and make it your own. Don't be afraid to be a little out there, and be sure that you're the one that's writing the narrative. Because like I said before, if you don't take hold of it, someone else is gonna do it for you. And thank you. That's the end. So I think I finished a little earlier than I planned. I know you said if you wanted to have like a Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
I have a question. How experienced were you in graphic design when you started to implement it into your career, and how confident were you in that when you started like actually using it at a job?
So that is a great question because I still find myself being like, oh my God, like, okay, for instance, I got really into graphic design back in college. It was something that it kind of happened. It was a happy accident when I was designing my first, like, real official portfolio. I like found myself like researching it because I saw a lot of the other students is kind of like, taking their project, plopping it on the page. And I said, no, I want to do more. And at the time, I didn't even think of it as graphic design. I just saw it again as an extension of my portfolio. But then as I got, I remember I went to a career fair in Auburn, and it was this firm there. They had a graphic design side and they had an interior design side. And I showed them my portfolio. She was like, oh, are you into graphic design? And I said, oh, I think I am actually. So it ended up being this really nice organic progression of I started off as a means to an end for my portfolio, and then I ended up like loving it, and I started incorporating it to it more. And then I saw just how much they go hand in hand and how important it is, and I always speak to it. Like, even if you may not think you're the best graphic designer, it's good to incorporate it. So as far as incorporating it into my career, I kind of just went for it. I remember, and even when I applied for the portfolio competition and I listed it on my resume and said, hey, I like doing graphics. I made it known in the interview that I'm kind of just getting started. I dabble in it, but I made it known that I think it's really important. And the person interviewing me was like, you know what, even if like, you may not be the best at it right now, I love how you are trying to incorporate it. And so when I got there, a graphic designer kind of showed me the ropes. So, okay, make sure to include this. So don't be afraid to include something that you are still kind of like novice at or new at, because now I feel like I've got the ropes pretty well in graphic design, and I have more to learn too. And I think it's always like being a student is always the best thing. Like, I'm never going to think that I know it all at graphic design. I'm like, I still have more to learn. I have more I'm getting better at. I just learned you can slant letters in InDesign and Illustrator. So still I'm learning every day. So I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you so much.
And I actually have a question as well. What do you have any advice for, say you're out and you're looking for jobs and your personal brand just is not connecting with other firms? What do you have as far as advice for not getting discouraged and going back to that bland standard, this is what I can do, that kind of thing?
Right. Yeah. That's a really good question. I would like, what I would like to do typically is if the person is up for it too, is if you interview with someone or if it's not resonating, either contact them and see, because some people will be willing to provide feedback. See what about it, like, because sometimes it can be like, I like a lot of color, but I feel that I found a way to balance it to where it's not, too crazy, but it's still graphically pleasing. Some people may like have, a great personal brand, but it's kind of that it's cluttered with a lot of stuff, and you just have to kind of cut through the unnecessary stuff that's not needed. So I would say reach out to that person and see like, hey, could I get feedback on what's happening? Talk to your peers, because your friends may be like, oh, like, for instance, I know that minimalism is not my thing, but I can look at it and see what's wrong and what's right with it. The same way how somebody, it may not be, their style may not be your thing, but they can look at it, appreciate it, and see the flaws and also see the strengths in it. And you can like figure out a good happy medium. Because again, you don't want to compromise who you are, but just make sure that you are putting it across in the best way and that it's not like getting convoluted or like lost in translation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question for you, Briana, in the chat. It's from Katie, and she says, hey, thank you for the great presentation. Jasmine and I just checked out your website, and it's amazing. What platform do you use for your website? I have some experience with Wix and Squarespace, but I'm wondering if yours is more custom.
I use Wix, actually. I used to use Squarespace, but I remember I like mine to be very customized and like very like catered to exactly how my portfolio looks or exactly how my brand looks. And back in the day, Wix used to be trash, but then they had an amazing, a really good social media campaign and marketing campaign about how customizable it was, and Squarespace wasn't doing it for me. So now I just use Wix because it's basically almost like Illustrator, where you can kind of go in, move things around, you can add animation, you can really make it your own, and you can use a template or you can start from scratch like I did. And so I recommend Wix highly, 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 because you can do a lot more with it than you realize you can. And thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
That's so funny that you mentioned that, because I use Wix for our ASID website, and then I use Squarespace for my personal website, and I just paid for Squarespace and I'm so mad about it.
Oh no.
On Squarespace and not being able to customize things, but Wix is like so much better.
Exactly. And I feel like Squarespace is more publicized because, like, it's like quick, you can like plug and play like as you need it. But I think I try to put it out there, make it known, like, hey guys, use Wix, it's actually really good. So like you said, it's really customizable.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a question for you, Briana.
Yes.
I'm wondering, what do you put most emphasis on when you're branding for yourself? Are you attracted to typography? Are you more interested in visuals? Do you make custom stuff? Like, I'm just curious to know how you implement it into your own design.
But I like to think that it's a happy medium of all of it. I think typography and like font is a huge, it can make or break it. I've seen some where I'm like, oh, this is really good with your font, could be better. Hey, let's change that. Okay. I obviously, because I've found myself like loving graphic design more and more, I think I do put a heavy emphasis on graphics. Like, for instance, this graphic here, I mentioned before that I'm in the process of rebranding. Like, I created this graphic because I felt like I have this whole thing where I love magic and sparkles. Like, I have a lot of tattoos that sparkles and like magical elements on them. And so again, I just, like, let's incorporate that into like my new branding. So I think it's more about like what you feel is important to you. Like, if you aren't a graphics person and you just want it to look nice, don't feel you have to have these like illustrations and all that kind of stuff. You can just have really beautiful typography, really beautiful layout, and like call it a day. Or if you want to include graphics, like for me personally, I lean heavily on the graphic side and typography and like the palette in terms of like, visually identifying my brand. But I think if you find a happy medium, any of them could like work as long as they work together.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
And then we have another question in the chat from Dr. Clemens. She says, wonderful presentation, Briana. Where do you want to be 5 years from now in your career?
5 years. So I actually have a 5-year plan. So for me, if things keep going the way they're going, I am finding myself getting more and more into the idea of experiential design, which is something that I had a hard time with because if some of you were at the class in February, I'm not sure if you in this, but I told a story about how when I left my previous firm and came to my new firm, one of the people there said, well, come back when you want to do real design. And so it was really discouraging because I was like, well, I like the path I'm headed down. So I think in like next 5 years, I really want to like get more into the idea of experiential. You're seeing more and more creative agencies pop up, which, it's not quite marketing, it's not quite interior design. It's like taking these two and fusing them together and seeing them work together. So I would love to be some sort of like senior or creative director or an art director at an experiential firm where I'm able to build, like, help design these amazing like restaurants and hotels and, nightclubs or what have you, while also having a say in the branding and the marketing and just like the full, like from start to finish, basically from soups to nuts, have a full say in it. Because one thing I'm finding that I love is like creative directing. As I've gotten farther in my job now, I'm one of the only designers on the team. And so they're really kind of giving me creative freedom with a lot of the projects. So I'm like, oh, I kind of like this, I like being able to have a say and like lead the visual storytelling and lead the creative narrative of it all. So yeah, probably either creative director or something along those lines. But we'll see. I like to keep it open.
I have a question. Back to like when you were saying how like not every employer is gonna like your portfolio or like how you're showcasing yourself. How do you navigate that interaction? Because like I'd imagine it'd be very uncomfortable. And how do you say like I appreciate that it's not your style, but like this is me and like this is who I am.
So I would say with that, because I feel like I can always tell when someone is like thrown off by what I put out, because like, ooh, that's a lot. They kind of have that saying like, ooh, wow. I would say the best way to like navigate that interaction is just to kind of like take it in stride and take it with a grain of salt. I think it's important to listen to criticism and feedback, because there was a time where I may have done too much, and so because I listened, I toned it down, but still kept it me. But also know why, again, like I mentioned before, know why you like something, know why you're doing it, because if you know the why, then when someone criticizes it, you can listen to, okay, like what are they actually saying? What can I actually take away from this, instead of just like changing it completely because they didn't like it. So I know that like me as a designer, I love a really beautiful, bold and vibrant color palette. I love bold typography, and I know why I like it, because I feel it like goes with my brand. It goes with the message I'm putting across of like joy and happiness and like magic and all that kind of stuff like that. So again, I think knowing the why, so even if someone does give you like feedback or like negative criticism, you understand like where they're coming from, but you know how, or why you chose what you did, if that makes sense.
No, that does. Thank you.
I have a question. You talked about, my internet might be cutting out. I'm so sorry. You talked about changing your brand. What cues did you feel in yourself, or like how did you know it was time to rebrand your brand?
So I will say, okay, the first time I rebranded, because I went to school in the South in Auburn. I was surrounded by a lot of people who were very like earthy and like just very very Southern. And so I wasn't quite sure who I was, so I kind of just like followed the pack and did what they did. So my first branding was black and gray with accents of green, and it was not me at all. But I didn't really quite know who I was, so I kind of just stuck with it for about a year, and I it worked for what it was. But then as I found more about myself, I was like, no, I'm gonna change this actually. So I would say, one, if you are so disjointed from like what your brand, like if you're kind of like, and you may not even notice you're doing it, because I didn't realize I was doing it until after the fact, where I caught myself just doing what everybody else was doing in my class because it seemed to get good grades and it seemed to get good internships. And so I would say the second way to know this time to change, like for instance, like my website, glad you guys love it, it's changing. Because as I realized I was getting more into this experiential creative agency mindset, my website now, just my brand now, is very focused on interior design. And you'll even notice I'm not sure if you saw my resume, I just have designer. Like I find myself slowly moving into just being a designer, being a creative. So I'm not boxing myself in. So I said, okay, I feel like it's time for a rebrand now, because I am discovering that yes, I'm good at graphics, but it's not just that. I love interiors, I love graphics, I love branding, I love marketing, and I love the intersection of all of these areas. And so I feel like one, if you see it's really disjointed, and two, if you see that like who you are and your interests are changing drastically, not just a little bit, because when I was in the graphics, I was like, oh, my website's fine, because it's still like just graphics interiors. But as I see now that it's moving more to like a more fleshed out holistic experience, I'm like, okay, time for a change.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, may cross their path.
That's right.
I have another question. So I just did my own personal branding, and there's a lot of black and white, but when I look around like at my apartment, there's a lot of like rustic but bright colors. But I am always just so scared to like introduce color into my portfolio or resume or anything. So how would you recommend going about that, and what websites maybe could I look at for like inspiration, anything like that?
Oh, great question, because I meant to mention that earlier. But so sorry. So in terms of incorporating color, because I was in the same boat. Like I said, I like was following the lead of everyone else. I kind of was like very black, white, gray, and brown. I looked around my whole life and I said, I'm colorful. I like color, or just like a little bit. So I would say don't be afraid to have iterations of your personal brand. Don't feel you have to rush through it. So you may start off and you may have too much color, but it's fine because you tried it. And then as you go through different iterations of it, you'll finally find that nice, happy medium, because I feel like I'm just now in a place where I'm like, okay, this is like nice and balanced. And I feel, it feels like me without being too over the top. So I would say do it in small doses, either small doses or just go for it, but just start by just incorporating it. Just add, whether it's in your like logo or your title or even just a background of one of your pages, just make it a color and just start there and just see how that feels. And as you move through it, just like, you know, just edit a little bit. You don't have to even like start from scratch. You can incorporate some color into what you already have and just see how that's looking. If you love it, then you can go further into it. And then, well, I'm sorry, what's the second part of the question again?
What kind of websites or like
Right.
any resources could I use for inspiration on that?
So two of my favorites are Behance and Dribble. They are amazing. I love going on there because it's like, you know, really professional and creative people that just is basically through Adobe, and they just submit their projects from there. Just like, you know, it's almost like a bunch of different case studies. So you can like look up personal identity, branding, interior design projects. Like they honestly have it all, website design. And you'll see like some really amazing examples of really strong brand identity and how they like bring it to life, whether it's their personal brand or they'll have brands for companies they've done. So I think those are two of my favorites to get inspiration from, because I can spend, it's almost like Pinterest, because like, you know, I would say Pinterest, but you all know that. And my teachers in school and in the workplace, they drill it into your head, like, don't go to Pinterest first, go somewhere else first. So I found myself like going to those places first. And then if I can't find anything, maybe Pinterest. But I don't tell them that though. I just sneak it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding like branding yourself with your own like portfolio, like as students, like a lot of our content is like very specific or like might not be fully representative of like our design style. How do you balance like your personal branding with the style of the work like we have thus far?
Right. Oh, that's a really good question. So for me, I was just kind of stubborn and I knew the work that I wanted to present. I mean, of course, follow your like follow your like the guidelines, but there is a way to incorporate your personal aesthetic into that while still like, you know, maintaining the quality and like what you're supposed to produce for the work. So like if you see my website, all the projects that I have in there are from like student work, and they were very specific. They say, you know, I want this and this and this, and I followed those guidelines. But I also was like, you know, I'm still going to incorporate my own design aesthetic into it, especially when you get out into the workforce. It may not be as possible because you're kind of, you know, depending on like who your client is, like what, you know, firm you go to, it may not be quite you in the beginning. So your design work or your student work is really where you want to showcase your personal design aesthetic. So I would say find, again, a happy medium between, you know, following the instructions and doing the work that, you know, is being asked of you, but also like, you know, look for ways to incorporate that. Like I know for me, one of my signature colors was like mustard yellow. If you look on almost every project on my website, that color or that palette, and you'll see my palette in general, is present in most of those projects. And because it worked with it and I made it work. And also too, and I caught myself doing this without realizing it back in the day, was like I would brand my projects before I started them. I would program them, brand them, figure out like what the story was behind them, and then design it. So that way, if your teacher asks you, why are you doing this? You can show her why you're doing it. It's not just being like, oh, because it's pretty. Like, you know, if you have a story and experience to tell, and you have this like amazing programming, then, and you're also following the instructions, if even if she doesn't like the way it looks or the aesthetic of it, because my teacher, she was very, very minimal and black and white. So my hotel project, she did not like it, but she gave me 100 on it because she couldn't argue with why I chose what I chose. So I think it's just, you know, if you have an argument or a good reason as to why you're doing what you're doing and you can present that, then I would say, you know, you have to kind of just go for it, because again, it's your career. Like you are the one that's going to have to use it to apply to jobs, and hopefully you get your dream career out of it. So, you know, you have to advocate for yourself. Sorry, teacher. Hope that's okay to say. I don't want them to come back and be like, well, Briana said, but.
Absolutely fine.
I have a question. What do you suggest for like regarding a logo, kind of where to begin? Because I know logos can represent you in just like a single picture, and it's kind of hard to figure out, you know, what you like and what you don't, and how to put it all into one thing. So kind of just how did you start that process?
So I know for me, one thing that even when I'm rebranding, I like to stick to make it easy. And my teacher said it very lovingly, not so much, but she said that like no one knows who you are. So don't use initials, don't use like, you know, arbitrary symbol. Like what I would do is I kind of stick to my name. My logo is just Briana Guin, but it's stylized in a really fun way that captures who I am without, you know, getting so far into like, you know, oh, this isn't me. And again, like I showed before, like my logo is basically Briana Guin across this with this symbol in the back. Like maybe if you want to get into graphics, find a symbol or like figure out like what icon or something represents you and then incorporate that. But like I think it's just, don't feel you have to have the like branding of a professional brand. You know, you don't have to have like logo, submark, hey, like all these crazy things. Just start with a simple, just your name. Like and like if something may grow out of that, because as I was doing my name, the symbol came, and then I have like a sub, like, you know, a submark and other things came after that. But just start with your name and just like have fun with that. Figure out how that can like be incorporated into your brand, how you want your brand to be, and then just go from there.
Awesome, thank you.
I don't, this one's kind of, what is like your dream project? If you could have any project, tell us more about like, if you could do anything, what would it be?
Oh, okay. So I kind of already had my dream project and it fell through and I was so sad. So I would really hope for it to come back one day. And I can talk about it now because it didn't really happen. But y'all all know Museum of Ice Cream. Have you ever heard of them before? So basically, the founder, Mary Ellis, she was proud of the brand that she created, but one of the things that she felt that she contributed to was this culture of like, you know, having your phones out, not paying attention, like the whole idea of Instagram museum. You know, she's not mad at it what it became, but that's not what she intended for it to be. So at my former company, iCrave, she came to us and was like, hey, I want to create this thing, an experience museum. And I want it to be where guests walk in, put their phones away. It's this amazing, magical, otherworldly experience, but it's still through the lens of like, you know, like beautiful and whimsy, but you're putting your phones away. So you have to like talk to each other, interact with one another. And so basically, okay, so this is kind of funny. My personal design aesthetic is very like, you know, fun and like, you know, very round. But when it comes to like my interior design aesthetic, it's the same, very colorful and fun. But I love like geometry and fun. Let me check and find actually. I think in here I even have like a like this right here or this right here. Like I love the idea of like arches and geometric and geometry and like really fun round shapes. And it was basically a project where it was like, and it's hard to explain because it would have taken like a lot of effort to do, but it was this amazing like museum wall with like things popping out of it. You can crawl through it and like roam through it and have these beautiful robust shapes and these amazing environments of like building blocks. And it sounds crazy talking about it, but that was my dream project because it was like my aesthetic in a project with my color palette and everything. But they couldn't get their budget together, so it fell through, and I was really sad about it, and that left the company, so they like never went through with it. But that was my dream project, and I think in the future I would just love to work on more projects that are very whimsical and fun and creative and like are out there and different, and not just like, you know, always hotels and restaurants and that sort of thing. That also again incorporate like branding and graphics and interior designs I can like help work out on. Also, at my current job, we did we were gonna, before COVID hit, we were gonna go to VidCon and do this like summer camp out of candy for the Mars company for like an exhibition booth for them. And that fell through, of course, too. And I'm really sad, like all these fun projects are falling through, but it had the same like aesthetic of like very fun, colorful, geometric, and I was really excited about it. But, you know, in the future, maybe.
I'm so sad. I'm so sorry they fell through.
And this happens. You'll learn that it happens more than you realize in, you know, when you get out into firms and in the workforce.
Thank you, Brianna. It was really nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really fun. And I had a lot of fun, like, coming up with the presentation and figuring everything out. And honestly, doing it kind of helped me figure some things out for myself. I was like, oh, yeah, I should be doing that more too.
Just
I
a
should
little
be.
reminder.
Exactly.
Well, it was awesome to have you, and I wish that we could have you again so that I can show our classmates you and your presentation. So you might be getting an email from us at some point.
Of course, I'd be happy to. I would.
Does anyone else want to say anything before we all go? No? Okay. Well, thank you,
Wonderful.
Brianna. Have a good night. We're so
Awesome
lucky to have
job.
had you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.